Hi, I would just like to review what the homework is for this week. You are to draw a portrait and you have two choices. You could draw a self-portrait in which you use a mirror and your lighting to get the dramatic effect of light and shadow. Or you could use some of the visual references that I have at the bottom of the page for our class this week and do a copy of a famous artist and their portraits. And so I want you to have that option. But I want to remind you, if you choose not to do a self-portrait this week, I would like you to do a self-portrait on your last class, which is next week. It's our last class. And so what I have here is I copied one of the portraits from the image choices I gave you at the bottom of the page. And I just showed you, this is Georgia O'Keeffe, the famous American artist. And what I did is I printed out the picture and I showed how it is very, very important to show the structure and the guidelines when you're creating a portrait. And so I did this in Sharpie on the picture so that you can see when you start your piece of paper, I don't want you to start drawing eyes, and nose and mouth. You must start with the basic structure. Remember, even Michelangelo and Leonardo da Vinci used guidelines. You must use guidelines. And so I'm looking. Notice how Georgia O'Keeffe's features, even though her head is slightly tilted, has eyes, nose, and mouth lining up on an angle. Notice her hands, and we haven't really talked about drawing other parts of your body, but even something as a hand has the structure of the bone in each finger. And so instead of drawing the rounded part of each finger. Really think about the sections of each bones and first draw them as interior lines and then add the thickness of the fingers. Where does the finger begin? Where does the finger end? And notice each knuckle as an ending piece for each finger. And so then we would go and say, okay, if this is where Georgia O'Keeffe's eyes are, where does the middle of her eye end in relation to the corner of her mouth? Notice that her mouth is much wider than mine, so her pupil ends right at the corner of her mouth. So similar to what we talked about before, using guidelines and reference points will help you draw with accuracy. When you're drawing your self-portrait by looking in the mirror and getting that, I still want you on your paper to draw basic shapes. No need to erase at first. Basic shapes. Draw lines very lightly that show the placement of all your features before you go on to create realism. I suggest that you don't do a straight on view, that you do a little bit of an angle. And I want you to try when you're doing your self-portrait to draw from life. And if you are going to draw from a picture, make this the last week that you do that, and you can use one of the famous artists that I included in there. Now, if I was to draw this picture, maybe I might want to use charcoal. And so you have also a second choice this week. You could continue with pencil and practice using your rendering technique to create realism in pencil, or you could do one more week of practice using the charcoal in both the direct application with the charcoal and with the subtractive technique, which is using your eraser, which is similar to what we did last week. And so I want this class to build on previous skills. And so you have more choice this week between pencil and charcoal, between a self-portrait, one of the images I have, and then the last week you're going to have even more choices. So I hope you enjoy drawing your portraits this week, and then I'll see you next week for our last class.